He was humiliated at 17. Now he defends the man who did it.
Newport, Tennessee. March drizzle. Malik Johnson glanced at the scratch screen of his old phone for the third time. 5:36 p.m. After-school tutoring had just let out, and like always, he was walking home alone from Newport High. Cutting through the back streets toward the worn-down apartment complex on Maple Court, where the porch lights rarely worked and the mailboxes creaked like rusted memories. His backpack was heavy with textbooks, his sneakers soaked from stepping through puddles. Malik pulled up the hood of his jacket and kept walking, the air damp and cold enough to seep through seams. He was 17, top of his class, son of a night shift nurse and a father who had died of a stroke. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind of kid who teachers said was going places, though no one quite knew where. But in the eyes of Officer Reed Callan, driving a white patrol car from the opposite end of the block, Malik was something else entirely. He was a suspicion. The brakes squealed. The car stopped suddenly in front of Malik, sending a wave of dirty water splashing onto his jeans. The driver's side door creaked open, followed by a voice, flat, direct, and already assuming guilt. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Malik froze. 6 words that felt more like a sentence than a question. He looked up. A middle-aged white man in a patrol uniform, broad-shouldered, shaved head, sharp jaw, one hand resting close to the gun on his hip, eyes calculating. "I just left school. Heading home." Malik answered carefully. "Where's home?" "Maple Court, 4-6. "Where were you walking from?" Malik blinked. "From school, like I just said." Callan stepped out of the car, headlights still aimed directly at Malik's face. He shielded his eyes with his arm. "Put the backpack down. Open it." "Why?" Malik asked, still calm but now wary. "You match the description." The officer's tone dropped lower. "Black male, teenage, hoodie, alone. Might be carrying." No radio report, no official bolo, just Malik's hoodie and skin color stitched into someone's stitched-together suspicion. Within 3 minutes, Malik found himself pressed against the hood of the squad car. His backpack was dumped onto the wet pavement. Books scattered. A half-crushed sandwich from his mom's morning prep was stepped on like it didn't matter. "Nothing here," Callan muttered, already turning back to his car. "Next time, watch yourself." Malik didn't respond. He just crouched down and slowly gathered his soaked notebooks, like he was picking up parts of himself that had been dropped without permission. Someone from the neighborhood walked by, glanced, then kept walking. No one said a word. No one stepped in. That night, Malik sat at the kitchen table while his mother, Alana, stood over the stove, legs aching after a 12-hour shift at the hospital. When he told her what happened, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the floor for a long time. Then she came over and wrapped her arms around him like she was holding him against a storm only she knew was coming. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered. "But don't forget how today felt, because one day you're going to need it." 10 years later, Malik still remembered exactly how it felt. Not to hate, but to understand. Justice doesn't grow out of anger. It starts with truth. And truth never forgets. The courthouse in Newport County was buzzing by 8:30 a.m. A panel hearing. Internal affairs. Police misconduct. Officer Reed Callan, now grayer, slower, heavier in the walk, was under review for an incident last month. A stop and search of a Middle Eastern man walking outside a gas station. No cause. No call. Just a feeling. And this time, someone had recorded it. The footage showed the man calmly asking, "Why?" while Callan pressed him against the wall. No aggression, no resistance, just confusion and humiliation. The clip made local news. The department couldn't ignore it. So now Callan sat in the defendant's chair. No badge, no gun, just a suit he hadn't worn in years and a lawyer he hadn't chosen. The hearing was meant to be fair, neutral, so an external defense attorney had been brought in. The courtroom doors opened. He walked in. Tall, poised, dark brown suit with a navy tie, clean-cut, calm eyes, and a briefcase that seemed to carry more than just papers. The bailiff cleared his throat. "Court recognizes Mr. Malik Johnson, attorney of record." Callan blinked. The name didn't register, not yet. Malik approached the bench, set down his case files, and turned toward the review panel. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I've reviewed the footage, the statements, and the record. And though I stand here as counsel, I am not here to excuse unlawful behavior, only to ensure due process is upheld, for everyone." He paused. Then calmly, he looked to Callan. Even for Officer Callan. There was a shift in the room. Some leaned forward. Others glanced around, unsure if they'd just heard what they thought they had. Callan looked up, finally saw the face, the voice, the eyes, the boy. Malik didn't smile, didn't flinch. "I was 17 when you first laid hands on me," he said evenly, not raising his voice. "No warrant, no call, just a hunch. You threw my books into the street. And you walked away like you'd done a favor." Callan swallowed hard. His lawyer shifted in his seat, suddenly alert. But Malik didn't press the moment into drama. He let it hang, quietly, firmly. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to make sure you get the fair hearing I never got. Because justice is only real when we give it, even to those who didn't give it to us." The panel was silent. The weight in the air was not shame. It was gravity. Something irreversible. The body cam footage was cued. Malik didn't look away. Neither did Callan. Because the past was no longer behind them. It was now Exhibit A. The footage ended, 3 minutes and 42 seconds. That was all. But in that short silence after the playback, it felt like every eye in the courtroom had stopped blinking. On the screen, Officer Callan had been shown grabbing the man, Mr. Naveed Rahimi, without warning, forcing him to the wall with one hand on his belt, the other pressing into a shoulder that had never resisted. Malik stood still. He didn't turn toward the review panel right away. He let the weight of the video breathe in the room, like the echo of a truth no one could unsee. "What you've just witnessed," Malik finally said, voice calm, "is not uncommon. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" A pause. "What makes it dangerous is not just the force used. It's the ease with which it's used, the reflex of power without pause." He turned to Officer Callan now. "Let's talk plainly." Callan nodded slowly. "You say you were responding to a potential threat. What was the threat?" "He was standing outside a business that had been vandalized recently," Callan muttered. "Did he have tools? A weapon? Was he loitering?" "No. He looked like he didn't belong." "Didn't belong," Malik repeated, not mocking, not accusing, just holding the words in air. "Because of his skin, his clothing, his silence?" Callan didn't answer. "Officer," Malik continued, "do you remember the last time you used that phrase in a report?" Callan's jaw tightened. 10 years ago, Malik said, you detained a 17-year-old walking home from school. You told him he didn't belong either." There was a stir in the room. The review panel exchanged glances. The court reporter paused before typing the next line. Callan looked down. Malik took a breath. Deep, controlled, then softened his voice, not for weakness, but for clarity. "I'm not here to humiliate you. That's easy. And cheap. I'm here to ask a harder question. Do you even recognize the person in that footage?" Callan didn't respond right away. "Because I watched that video over and over," Malik said. "Not for anger, but for insight. I wanted to believe that wasn't you. But I've seen that version of you before. I lived it." The words landed like quiet thunder. Callan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but didn't interrupt. "Do you believe you were justified?" Malik asked, standing still, not pacing like TV lawyers do. Callan raised his eyes, voice low. I thought I was following procedure." "Procedure doesn't require judgment," Malik said. "It requires justification." He stepped back, returning to the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, this is not about a man who made one mistake. It's about whether we let those mistakes become habits, whether the badge becomes armor or a mirror. He paused, then turned again to Callan, his voice not rising, not cracking, just steady. I don't want an apology for what you did to me. I want an answer for what you did to him, and for how many more might still be next. Silence. But this time it was not defensive, it was reflective. During recess, Callan sat alone in the small room adjoining the court. His lawyer leaned in to speak, but he waved him off. Malik stood by the hallway window, arms folded. Behind him, an older black janitor swept the floor quietly. At one point, he stopped, looked up, and nodded toward Malik. Not with words, but with understanding. "I've seen a lot of trials," the man said quietly. "Never seen one where the lawyer forgave more than he fought." Malik gave a small, tired smile. "Sometimes," he said, "the hardest fight is to not become the person who hurt you." When the panel returned, Malik took his seat. He didn't speak again until prompted. "Counsel," the lead reviewer asked, "would you like to recommend disciplinary action?" Malik looked toward Callan. The man's posture had changed, less combative, more hollow. Something had cracked, not out of shame, but out of finally seeing. "Yes," Malik said simply. "I believe accountability is necessary, but not because I want him punished." The panel leaned forward. "Because this department can't grow if it pretends this didn't happen. And because real justice leaves no one comfortable, not even me." He looked down at his notes, closed them, looked up again. "But I do believe he can still become something more than the worst thing he's done." As the session adjourned, Malik walked toward the exit. Just before reaching the doors, he heard a voice behind him. Rough, quiet, heavy. "Mr. Johnson." He turned. Callan stood there. No badge, no uniform. Just a man. Older, smaller somehow than before. "I don't expect forgiveness," Callan said, voice breaking. "But thank you for not using your power the way I used mine." Malik didn't speak for a moment. Then he extended his hand. "I don't forgive you because you apologized," he said. "I forgive you because I refuse to carry this weight for one more day." They shook hands. And just like that, something shifted, not in the news, not online, but in a quiet corridor of a Tennessee courthouse where a young man once held against a wall had finally stood tall enough to set someone else free, not from consequences, but from denial. The courthouse emptied slowly that afternoon. People lingered, not because they had business left, but because something unspoken had passed through the room. Not just a ruling, not just a reckoning, but a reminder of how justice can sound like a whisper instead of a gavel. Malik didn't stay long. He packed his briefcase quietly, gave a final nod to the review panel, and left through the side entrance. Outside, the late sun filtered through the Tennessee pines. He paused for a moment on the steps, breathed deeply, letting the air touch the parts of him that had clenched for too many years. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "I watched the live stream. Your father would have cried. I'm crying enough for both." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Some things live deeper than words. 2 days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at Malik's firm. No return address. Just his name, typed clean and centered. He opened it, expecting a formal notice, maybe a press request. It wasn't. The handwriting was uneven, slanted to the right, but careful. "Mr. Johnson, I don't know what to say that would make any of it right. I'm not even sure I should say anything at all. But I'm not writing to explain myself. I'm writing to say I watched that video from 10 years ago, the one you described. I went to the precinct records, pulled up the stop report. I read my own words. I didn't recognize the man who wrote them. I thought I was doing my job. But looking back, I was just doing damage and calling it duty. You didn't have to represent me, and you certainly didn't have to speak the way you did. But you did. And somehow, that hurt more than if you'd tried to destroy me. I deserve the worst. But instead, I got you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know. You didn't just save my badge from being stripped. You saved a part of me I thought I'd lost for good. Thank you, R. Callan." Malik folded the letter, sat with it for a long time. not moved by flattery, not seeking redemption, just breathing. Because some apologies don't come as confessions, they come as consequences. The following week, Malik found himself back in his office late one evening. Rain whispered against the windows. His desk lamp hummed quietly. He wasn't reviewing a hetzel, he was writing something personal, notes, reflections. Not for publication, not even for his future self, just a record of how it felt to stand in front of the man who had once humiliated him and not flinch. People think forgiveness is letting go of justice, he wrote, but they're wrong. Forgiveness is refusing to let injustice define your identity. It's saying, you don't get to shape who I become. He underlined the sentence, sat back, and for the first time in a long time, felt lighter, not because the past had changed, but because he'd stopped dragging it behind him. A few days later, a major cable network called. They wanted Malik on a primetime segment, America's Legal Heroes. He declined. The producer was shocked. Why? Malik's reply was simple. Because this story isn't mine alone, and turning pain into content doesn't heal anything. Instead, he suggested something else. Talk to the man I defended. Ask him why he wrote me that letter. That's the real story. They never aired the segment, and that was perfectly fine. A week later, Malik was asked to guest lecture at a local law school. He hesitated. He preferred briefs to podiums, but something about the request lingered. Maybe it was the fact that the class was titled Ethics and the Anatomy of Bias. He walked in wearing a charcoal suit, tie loose at the collar. About 30 students looked up from laptops. Some recognized him. Others just saw a guest speaker. Near the back sat a young man in a red hoodie, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Malik noticed him immediately, because Malik had been him once. "What do you do?" a student asked midway through the session. "When the system doesn't believe your truth?" Malik didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, pausing before speaking. "You don't shout louder. You show up again, and again, and again. Until the silence gets so loud, it has no choice but to break." Another student asked, "And what if that doesn't work?" Malik smiled just slightly. "Then you become the system and change it from inside." The young man in the red hoodie sat straighter, and that was enough. 2 weeks after the hearing, Officer Callan formally submitted his retirement paperwork. No press release, no farewell speech. But in his last week, he made a quiet request to his department to create a training module on implicit bias co-developed by community leaders, including Malik. The chief agreed, and on his final day, Callan left his badge on the desk with a note beneath it. Not broken, just finally aware. That night, Malik sat on his mother's porch. A cup of tea in one hand, a blanket draped across his lap. The same porch where, 10 years earlier, he'd first whispered the words, "He didn't even ask me anything, he just grabbed me." And his mother had answered, "Then one day, you asked the questions." Now he had. And now, he could rest. 2 months later, Newport had settled back into its old rhythm. News of the hearing no longer made front pages. The viral videos that once stirred outrage had faded into the tide of newer headlines. As always, but not everyone forgot, and not all change is loud. Malik was invited back to Newport High School, the same school he once walked home from in the rain, only to be detained on the street without cause. This time, he didn't carry a backpack. He brought with him an open conversation titled, "Dignity, the Law, and the Choices You Make When No One's Watching." About 60 students packed into a small auditorium. No one forced them to attend. They chose to. Malik didn't lecture. He told a story. He spoke of a kid who once believed that if he studied hard, spoke respectfully, and stayed out of trouble, he'd be treated fairly. But later realized that sometimes his skin spoke louder than his words. He spoke of the day he stood in front of the man who had once humiliated him, and chose not to retaliate. A white student raised his hand, genuinely asking, "If you hadn't been a lawyer that day, would anyone have believed you?" Malik smiled gently. "Probably not. And that's why I'm still here. because no one should need a title or a degree just to be treated like a human being. There was no applause, but many eyes were misted. A month later, Malik received a folder from the Newport Police Department's Human Resources Office. It was a formal recommendation naming him as an honorary advisor to their internal reform program, signed by Callan's successor. Attached was a handwritten note, not asking for forgiveness, just trying to get it right. We're ready to listen if you're still willing to speak. Malik didn't respond right away. He placed the file in a drawer where he kept things not forgotten, but not yet forgiven either. One quiet Saturday afternoon, at a coffee shop near the train station, Malik was waiting for an old friend when a familiar face walked in. No badge, no press. Jalen, the young student in the red hoodie from his guest lecture. Jalen didn't say much. He simply handed Malik a folder. I applied to Tennessee state law. My essay's called, I Stayed Silent Until I Saw Someone Who Didn't. Malik accepted it, nodded. Jalen didn't wait for a reaction. He bowed his head slightly, then left. Since then, once a month, Malik hosted a community dialogue circle, bringing together students, officers, former detainees, and even retired cops. Not to debate, but to listen, to hear the fears no one had room to speak aloud before. At one session, someone asked, "Do you honestly believe we can change the system?" Malik replied, "I'm not sure, but I do know one thing. Silence definitely can't. And action always leaves a trail." One evening, as the seasons turned, Malik sat on his mother's porch, an old ritual. The air was crisp, the scent of night jasmine floating on the breeze. His mother brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. They didn't say much. After a while, she spoke. "I see you forgive people, but I've never seen you look weak. You did something most people think only saints can do." Malik smiled faintly. "I forgave, not because they deserved it, but because I don't want to carry them around in my mind one day longer." They sat there quietly, 2 generations, one who had been hurt, one who taught that pain is never a reason to stay silent. As the night deepened, Malik looked up at the familiar sky, the one he once dreamed of escaping. But now he chose to live under it, as someone shaped by the past, but not trapped by it. "I didn't come to win. I came to stand in a place where truth gets heard, even when no one claps for it. Tomorrow, someone else will be misjudged by appearance. But if they're lucky, there will also be someone, like Malik, who's willing to stand up. Not for revenge, but to remind the world, dignity is not up for negotiation."